Hello, this is old Mr. Kent of MrKent.com. And if you do enough riding your e-bike on dirt roads, sooner or later you're going to find the worst road in the county. And so I found the worst road in the county, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to give you folks a tour of the worst road. It's only 2 miles long, and here's where it begins. And I've cut out some places where it doesn't change much because it was a long ride, and this part gets kind of boring. But anyway, so it's amazing that the county doesn't do anything about it, but that's all right. So as we go along here, I'll just go ahead and start telling you some more stories. I was talking on the last video I made. I was telling a story about when I lived on Grant Street in an apartment that was owned by an old lady, and she was married to a 40-year-old man, and they were arguing and fighting all the time. But she had a grown-up son. He was a grown man. He had built his house along the road on the lake out to Lake Whatcom in Bellingham, and it had partially burned down. And so I don't remember exactly the series that everything happened. So, but it was September, and it was at the end of the summer where I had spent the summer living there, and didn't I probably went to summer school for a while there. And so you can see this is paved, so this is kind of boring, but it needs to be repaved. And most of the improvements of this road have been made by the people that lived there. So anyway, I was out helping him. He was rebuilding the burnt down part of his house, and so he would take me out, pick me up, take me out in the morning, and I'd work with him out there. And then he'd bring me home at night. Well, this one day, I remember he was standing on top of it was a concrete wall that he'd been working on, and he stood up, and he smelled, and he said, "Hey, you smell that?" And I said, "Smell what?" And he said, it's fall. And so I stood up, and I said, "Well, I guess it is." And you could tell, you could feel the difference in the air on that particular day. And so that was the first time in my life that I had ever noticed that you could actually feel the seasons. So anyway, and so that was an experience, and I made a few bucks helping him there. And then he lived, like I said, he lived on the road going out to Lake Whatcom. Lake Whatcom was, I don't remember now, but it's several miles long. And at that time, back in the 60s, there were no houses along the edge. It was just wooded, and but a little narrow road that had a lot of curves in it as you go along. And then there's mountains on both sides. And so we had as you can see, this is not a very good road. It's actually a road. And so Bellingham had a heavy snowfall, and then it had thawed, and a lot of the snow melted off, except for places where the mountains along the side of that road shaded it. And so the snow stayed there, and then we had a heavy freeze, and so there were tire tracks. If you go along the road, then you'd come around a corner where that road had been in the shade the whole time, and so there were frozen tire tracks around that corner. And I remember I was out there riding my motorcycle and going along, and I came along. I was going around the corner and around a curve, and as I came around the curve, I hit an icy spot. I was going about 30 miles an hour, 35, and I hit an icy spot that had a lot of frozen ruts. Here's another place that's been improved, and so I'll skip the boring part there. Anyway, and my wheels got caught in one of the ruts, Now, if I'd have been going faster, I would have been thrown out of that rut. If I'd have been going slower, I would have had to turn in towards the center of the curve. But as it turned out, my wheel just followed that rut all the way around the corner, and it was a long corner. But I'll never forget that. I'm sure you wanted to know about that. Also, the kitchen window, I think I told you in the last video of my apartment, looked out over Bellingham Bay. You could actually see the water out there. Bellingham Bay is at the end of the Strait of Juan de Fuca, which is a long, probably 50-mile long strait of water. Pretty nice road, huh? This is a county road. Anyway, so it was long, and then at the west end was the ocean, and then at the east end was Bellingham Bay. So all the weather that came from the ocean came straight down that strait and landed and hit Bellingham Bay. And so I could see clouds rolling and stuff, and I got interested in studying that, and I got to where I could predict the weather. I'd go up to the cafeteria in the morning, and they'd ask me what the weather was going to be that day, and I'd tell them. and you can see why I like shock absorbers on the front of my bike. So anyway, I built this little weather station. I had I can't think of the name. It spins in the air in the wind and tells you how fast the wind's blowing. I didn't have a meter on it, but I could tell by just how fast it was spinning looking out the window. And then I also had a weather vane that I made. I made the whole thing and set it out there. And the interesting thing, and by the way, here I should have made a left to go around these bushes. Would have been more where the road goes, but I chose right. So anyway, we'll get back on the road here in a minute. But so as this is jumping ahead a little bit, but when I went to move out, I was sorting through all my papers and stuff out by that kitchen window, and I found this paper which was where they give you an aptitude test when you first start college, and I took the test, and it said I should be a meteorologist. And at the time when I was starting college, I thought, a meteorologist? And here I had, just on my own, built myself a weather station. All right, now if you're in a nice low-slung car, you don't want to go along this road. But anyway, so then another story is when I had a friend who had a Cushman motor scooter, and we went for rides together a lot. And my motorcycle, 60cc, it'd go about 60 miles an hour. So he and I decided, since Bellingham was up near the border, that we would take a trip up to Vancouver. It was Vancouver. I had to stop and think for a minute. Up in British Columbia. And so we got on our motorcycles, and we headed up on a Friday night or Friday afternoon, and we were going to stay up there overnight just to see what it was like up there. So we started, and everything was fine, only about halfway up. Of course, up there in Bellingham in the northwest, it rains a lot. It started raining on us just a little bit, and as we went further and further, of course, we had to go across go through customs, which back in those days was pretty easy. And so, you wouldn't want to drive a low-slung car over this road. But anyway, so when we finally got to where we were going, we were looking for the YMCA, and we had goggles on, and it was rainy and everything, and we saw the sign sticking out on the side of the building, so we pulled over, parked our motorcycles, and walked in to see if we could rent a room, and there was a girl waiting at the counter. And so we said we'd like to rent a room, and she said, this is the YWCA. And we went back out, and we looked at the sign, and sure enough, our goggles were so smeared with water that we didn't read it right. So we found the right place, and we stayed there all night, and and then we came back the next day. The next day was pretty boring. We didn't we didn't really have much fun up there, but we made the trip, came home the next day, and so that was our trip on our motorcycle. I also made several trips down to Seattle, where my folks lived, on my 60cc motorcycle. If I laid down on the tank, and like on a highway, if I laid down on the tank and gave it full throttle, I could actually go 60 miles an hour. And so that's how I got around back in those days. And as it turned out, after a while, my parents got a different car, and they had two cars, and they got to feeling kind of bad for me. So they brought up their old car, and not to give it to me, but so I'd have a car to drive, like when it was raining and stuff like that. So anyway, those are some stories from when I lived up there in Bellingham. And this is the end of the road, 2 miles long. Not a bad road after all. Thank you for watching my videos, and God bless.